What's the first step to factoring the first one?
Greatest.
Okay, you've had about 6 minutes to figure it out. You don't know how to do the first step of the first one. So let's take a second. The first step would be to factor out the GCF. And what do both of these terms have in common? A negative 2 x. So negative 2x.
I actually did that.
Which leaves behind
X
minus
5
plus.
Oh wow, yeah.
5. If you factor out a negative, it changes the signs inside the parentheses. A negative divided by a negative becomes a positive, okay? And now, we have factored. The x's have now been separated. That is factoring, is undoing multiplication. So the next step is you just set the factors equal to 0. So if I set negative 2x equal to 0, divide by negative 2, does that even matter?
No.
Because 0 divided by anything is 0. But that is an answer. That means that this quadratic crosses the x-axis at 0. The other answer is a little bit more obvious. It comes out to negative 5, right? So this quadratic crosses the x-axis at negative 5 and 0. And would this one open up or would it open down? Down, and how do we know that? It's pretty easy. There's a negative a value. Good. So we can kind of have a general idea of what this is going to look like. It'll look something like that. Okay? Number 2, is there a GCF?
Nope.
No, there's not a GCF. Stephen Moore, what do we do if there's no GCF? What do we go straight into? 3 terms. All 3 terms are there. There's an x in the middle, so what do we have to do? Shh, Stephen, what's our only option? No, there's nothing to distribute. There's no parentheses. I'll help him out. Factor, bottoms up, right? 3 terms, all 3 terms. The only thing we know how to do is bottoms up. So a times c is 9. The factors of 9 that add up to 6 are 3 and 3, which means my factors are x plus 3 times x plus 3.
Yep.
So what is really my only answer?
Yes.
3. It's negative 3, right?
Yeah.
There's only one answer. What does that mean about this parabola?
It's one solution.
What does one solution look like on the graph?
On the vertex is on the x-axis.
The vertex is on the x-axis, and does this one open up or down?
It opens up.
Positive, so it would open up. So this quadratic is sitting on negative 3, and it opens up. Okay, we're putting all the dots together, putting the pieces together. Last one. Is there a GCF of 2, 9, and 10?
No.
No. The last term doesn't have an x, so we can't factor an x out. So what do we go to?
The bottoms up.
Bottoms up, a times c. So what factors of 20 add up to 9?
Yep. Plus 5.
Does that work?
Yes.
So we go x plus 5.
Yep.
We go x plus 4. But I'm not done yet.
Bring down your A.
Divide by a, divide by a. So we get 2x plus 5, bottoms up, and what are these called? This and this are called the factors. So if I ask you on a test to factor, you would stop right here and circle those parentheses. But this is an equation. It's equal to 0. So how do I solve the factors?
Zero product.
Yeah, zero product property. So we set each one equal to 0. We get negative 2. And we get negative 5 halves. Okay, if you cannot do bottoms up yet, you have to come in for tutoring. I mean, you have to. We've literally done bottoms up for like 6 or 7 class periods, plus the sub. Like, you should have bottoms up down. There's no excuse to miss that anymore, okay? So if you need extra help, please come in. I'll help you out. But you've got to get that learned or you're really going to struggle from here on out. All right. Today, we are going to do something called completing the perfect square. So, our first definition is a perfect squared trinomial. And a perfect squared trinomial is a, first of all, what do I mean by a trinomial? Three
Some numbers.
terms. Good. Something plus or minus something plus or minus something. So 3 terms. And this says that the trinomial factors as a binomial. What is bi? 2 squared. So they're telling me that these 3 things are going to somehow collapse into 2 things squared. So let's see how that happens. So write down your first example is x squared plus 6x plus 9. Where it says perfect squared trinomial example. So let's attempt a bottoms up here. So when I do a times c, we get 9. And what factors of 9 add up to 6? 3 and 3.
Oh,
So what this comes out to is x plus 3 times x plus 3. But what's a shorter way of writing something times itself? That's something squared. So I can actually simplify this down to x plus 3 squared. This is called a perfect square trinomial. So the trinomial has factored into a binomial 2 times squared. Okay? Do the last 2 on your own real quick.
because it's negative.
Those 2 numbers need to add up to negative 10.
Right.
So we need to change this to a minus sign. So x minus 5 times x minus 5. But a negative times a negative is a
Positive.
That's how we get the positive 25. Okay? And this one's pretty easy. 6 times 6 would be x plus 6 squared. Going on. There was one kind of like this on your snapshot. So it says, what would go in the blank to make this a perfect square trinomial?
Wait, let me see.
got you.
Cameron?
49.
49. How did you get that?
Well, how I do it is if I know it has to be a perfect square, I just do half of the
Good.
b.
Which is 14.
Yeah.
So it's half of 14.
7.
7. And then we know that that's coming from factors. So 7 times 7 is 49, right?
Yep.
So our little formula, you'll need to write this down if it's not already on there. You need to remember this. The way we complete the square is b divided by 2 squared. b divided by 2 squared. Sometimes it's not as obvious. So I would still write down the formula even if you think you're really good at these.
Can we write B over 2, please?
Yes. So let's do one of these together and I'll have you do the other 2 on your own. So what is b? 20. So we take 20, we divide it by 2, which is 10, and then whatever that is, we square it.
100.
So our blank would be 100. In other words, the factors of 100 that add up to 20 are 10 and 10. Okay, do the last 2 on your own. Should take like 1 minute. Okay, so Colin, what is b?
No.
What is b?
B is -4.
Good, it's -4, right? So b divided by 2 is -2. And what is -2 times itself? 4. 4. Question. Will you ever put a negative number in that blank?
No.
Never. Because a number times itself is always positive. Positive times a positive is a positive, and a negative times a negative is a positive. Okay?
But what if you threw an I in there?
Number 3, the third one is 2 divided by 2,
1.
which is 1. Squared is 1. I'm going to add one more. Add this to your notes. X squared plus 3x.
Alright.
3 divided by 2 is 1.2.
Okay, this is actually easier if you leave it as a fraction. So if we take 3
Yes.
and we divide it by 2.
Yes.
Just leave it as 3 halves. Leave it as 3 halves. And then a fraction squared is a fraction times itself, right?
Yes.
And the way we multiply fractions is straight across the numerator and straight across the denominator.
6/4.
So it'd be 9/4. Leave it all as fractions, 9/4.
When I simplify that down to 3
So how would this factor? What are the factors of 9/4?
No.
She's saying
You guys. What are the factors of 9/4 that add up to 3?
3 and 2. Wait, what? Wait, no, repeat the question. Sorry.
What times what? Cameron, what times what is 9/4? But those same two numbers add up to 3. Good thing,
Add
Sam.
up to. Oh,
Jared?
oh.
Oh, you're asking what multiplied by itself is 9/4?
And those same two numbers add up to 3.
That's 3.
3 and 2.
Three
Yeah.
halves.
Okay.
So this would actually factor as x plus
I was just about to say that.
3 halves squared. Now I would not do a bottoms up here, right? If I bring the 2 to the front, that gives me 2x. And 2x times 2x is 4x squared, but is that what I started out with? No, we started out with a 1. So you would actually keep it factored like this, and you'll need to know this for next class, okay? All right, going on. Skip that for now.
Do you have another snapshot?
All right, let's take a look at this problem right here. Do you have this one? I think it's on the back side of your notes. Yes, example 2 on the back side of your notes. All right, you guys, let's try an A times C. Bottoms up. So A times C is what?
1.
What factors of -1 add up to -8?
Nothing.
Absolutely nothing.
Nothing. This is the first time we've seen a quadratic that actually does not factor. It doesn't work. There are no factors of -1 that add up to -8. That's why we do something, so A times C does not work. This is why we do something called completing the square. So, do this with me. I'm going to go step by step, and I would write, or actually, let's just do this one together, and then I'll tell you what to do from there. So, first step, you're going to add the constant to the other side. So, which one's the constant?
The first. Wait, no.
That's the coefficient. The coefficient's the number in the very front that's multiplied by x squared. What's the constant? Yeah, it's the c value, right? Ax squared plus bx plus c, constant. That's because it's always going to be -1, right? There's no x that it's being multiplied by that can change it. So -1 will always be -1. So that's called the constant term. We need, basically, A times c is not working. Bottoms up isn't working. So we're going to say, hey, -1, get out of the way. And we're going to add, we're just going to move it over to the other side for a minute. We don't care about you anymore. X squared minus 8x equals 1. You're going to rewrite it, but you're going to put a blank on both sides. Put a blank here, equals 1, and then you're going to put another blank on the right side. Okay, so now we're going to do what we did on the front side. Just look at the left side. What would go in that blank to complete the perfect square?
64.
Let's take b. B is -8.
16.
Divided by 2 is what? And -4 times itself is 16. So you'll put a plus 16 in that blank. Now we can do anything we want to one side of the equation as long as we do what? The same to the other side. So you also need to put a plus 16 on the right side. Alright, so here we do an A times C, which would be x minus 4 times x minus 4, which I could rewrite as x minus 4 squared. Simplify the right side, that's 17. Square root both sides. Now we're just doing a square root